All right. Well, a big thank you to Kanika Arora. She's joining us today from the University of Iowa to share about the Farm Families Coping with Dementia program that she and her colleague Julie Bobitt have been launching just this summer, and it will be continuing into next year as well. We will have Kanika go ahead and share her presentation to start, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end if there are any.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to WFAN. So I've been working with Julie for a while. Julie's based in the University of Illinois, Chicago. She's not here today. She's not in the country. But Julie and I are both aging researchers. We've done a lot of work focused on older adults policy as it relates to older adults, dementia, also dementia caregiving, and so on. So this was an interesting collaboration when I started working with the Great Plains Center for Agricultural Health as their evaluator. And I had really nothing to do with older adults per se, but I tried to sort of see if I could find a niche, and I did, to try to look at dementia among older farmers. So that's how this project idea sort of came into being. And Julie, she grew up on a farm, and she's done a lot of work with me, and she's based in it's another state in the Midwest. So we collaborated together on this project, and I'll try to provide more details on how we came up with this and what this is as we go through this presentation. So, in terms of just looking at dementia in the US in 2025, an estimated 7 million people who are 65 and older are currently living with dementia. This affects about 11% of the total population 65 years and older. Just how much we hear about it, it might seem like it would be higher, but the numbers quickly increase by age. So if you look at this figure on the right-hand side, we see that about 73% of the people who have dementia are 75 years and older. It accounts for about 100,000 deaths each year. And about, more than 11 million US adults provide unpaid care for someone with a form of dementia. So it's a wide-ranging disease with consequences to a lot of people, including the person with dementia, health systems, as well as family members who provide informal care to someone with dementia. So the studies have looked at the cost of dementia in the US, and it's estimated at about, 781 billion. It includes lots of things like medical and long-term care costs and costs of the hours of caregiving and so on. But if you want to just think about this number, 781 billion, the U.S. military, Department of Defense budget for 2023 was about 858 billion. So it's pretty huge, in terms of how much this is a problem. And generally, the incidence of dementia is on the decline, meaning that fewer people are newly getting diagnosed with dementia each year. But as the baby boomers age and Americans live longer, the number of people who live with dementia is increasing. So there's been some new research, some that I have done, which has shown that older Americans with longest held jobs in agriculture experience higher likelihood of developing dementia. Essentially, people who have long-term occupations in agricultural, fishing, and forestry sectors had sort of greater odds of having dementia, and even higher the longer time they spent in these jobs, relative to people who are in sort of other jobs, even accounting for the fact that we look at sort of just rural areas. And sort of the possible reasons behind this linkage could be lots of things, including chronic pesticide exposure, or sort of midlife hearing loss, or mental health concerns such as social isolation. These are all risk factors for dementia, and factors that are commonly experienced by those in the ag sector. Other work that has looked at just Wisconsin has shown similar findings, where early life farm residence was a risk factor for sort of lower brain functioning in later life. And they linked it to exposure to lead-based and toxic chemicals and pesticides during childhood, as well as lead deposits in the soil in the area. So there is some consistent evidence showing that ag workers and people in ag are at higher risk of developing dementia. So why does it matter when we have dementia and farm families? Well, I'm going to talk about two different aspects. One is the safety risk, and the other is the mental health concerns. And also it's important to think about who it affects. So, as you know, we all know, I don't really have to go into it, but ag is one of the most hazardous US industries. I think the fatality rate is about 8 times that of most other industries. There's also no standard retirement age in agriculture. Nearly 40% of producers are over age 65 based on the latest ag census. And older adults account for 80% of ag-related fatalities, which means that, 80% of ag-related fatalities involve someone who's 65 years and older. And they also represent a very sizable amount of ag-related emergency visits. So safety is a huge issue in general, but it's more so for older adults. And when we think about some of the symptoms of dementia, which we go over in our training, older farmers who have dementia, and if they continue to work, if they're more likely to continue to work, they might experience more injuries or more severe injuries. And there are also risks to others. Some of the symptoms of dementia are such that just the proximity of living on a farm, of being close to things like heavy equipment or livestock or cornfields, affect those who are not only just farm workers. So irrespective of whether they work on farms, even if you are living on a farm or living close to a farm adjacent area, it could affect you. And it could also affect other farm employees if you are working with someone and their cognitive issues that can create dangerous situations. So one of the things that we did when we started thinking about this project was talk to people. So we talked to a lot of caregivers who had or were currently providing care to someone with dementia. And we're just gonna listen to a video, or basically audio, from someone who did this for their father. Next.
My dad was a stereotypical cattleman. He lived, breathed everything through his cows. It was the first thing on his mind when he woke up and the last thing on his mind when he went to bed. The cows were fed and cared for before he would eat, sleep, but personal care were second to the cattle's needs in his mind. He was quiet and reserved, would do anything to help anybody he could. So we all knew something was wrong for several years. It was probably 3 to 4 years of when we actually got the diagnosis. The problem in agriculture versus the rest of the world is being a farmer or cattleman, whatever it is their identity. Your dad was no exception. So the struggle was just how do you remove him from his identity, and you can't. So you have to continually balance what is best for your family and the farming operation. In our case, the sale barn, trying to operate a sale barn. Somebody with cognitive issues is wandering around and putting himself and others in danger. And it's really tough to continue the business. So we ended up selling the business because of that. But the discussion was just whether to get rid of his cows. And that's where I stepped in and said no, that was his identity, and he had to have something. We couldn't completely strip him of his dignity and his identity. So financially wasn't that much of an issue, but I continually question myself, is this the right thing? Would it be better just to remove him completely? How do you balance that? It's a lot of conflicts that go through your mind when trying to make that decision. It's completely through your mind. It's
Yeah, sorry for that not so smooth transition. But essentially, this is one of the things we heard from a lot of people, what Tim was saying, that it's a safety issue, but it's a harder issue because it's not like your typical dementia scenario where it's hard to take the identity out. And we also sort of actually looked at some numbers looking at safety. So what we did was to look at some data using data from emergency department or trauma data, essentially. So this is data from 2017 to 2021, reported by all trauma centers, or basically you can think of this as ED visits, you know, in the country. And we looked at three kinds of people who had which is in blue, an agricultural injury with dementia, people in orange who had an agricultural injury, but they did not have a dementia diagnosis, and then green, people who just had a dementia diagnosis and they did not have an agricultural injury. And this is important thing to note here is a dementia diagnosis is based off on having a diagnosed dementia diagnosis, and, you know, not a lot of farmers actually get it. So, you know, some get it, some don't. But one of the things to keep in mind here is that we see the mechanisms of how people get injured or show up to ED visits are very different. People with agricultural injury and dementia are less likely to have falls as compared to, you know, dementia in the community, which is almost always just coming to the ED because of falls. The green, you know, tall building under falls is, you know, people in the community. About 95% of them show up to the ED just because of a fall. Whereas in the other two scenarios, especially even with agricultural injury and dementia, you're seeing other kinds of mechanisms show up, especially transport or motor vehicle accidents, and then machinery and environment as well. So that's important to keep in mind, that this is a very different group of people. Now, I won't belabor this slide a lot, but just to think of, you know, these two groups, the blue and the pink, you know, blue are those who have dementia and an agricultural injury, and the pink or purple in this case are people who have just dementia and no agricultural injury. And we see that they have much more likelihood of having a more severe injury and also higher probability of being in an ICU or surgery post their ED visit. So not only are their mechanisms different, but they are also having more severe injuries. So another reason why we want to focus on this group as far as the safety perspective is concerned. But there's also mental health concerns, you know, when it comes to dementia. And this is for the caregiver or the family member. And in often cases, you know, dementia caregiving is almost exclusively, or at least in a majority of cases, done by women, whether they're adult daughters or the spouses, and in some cases, even sisters. So when we're talking about a caregiver for a person with dementia, or we're talking mostly about women. One of the key concerns is kind of what Tim was talking about. I know it was a male, but still, you know, this idea of balancing safety and preserving independence. And that has led to a lot of mental health issues for the caregiver, for the family member themselves, not just based on what Tim said, but in other studies as well. Also, there's a lot of stigma in rural communities still when it comes to dementia, and people don't want to talk about it. You know, there are limited resources, and they are even less frequently accessed because, you know, privacy concerns or stigma, you know, and families tend to keep this within the family. You know, also when we think about, you know, the rest of the world and agriculture, as sort of Tim was talking about, you know, it's not, you're balancing, you know, caregiving with a 9-to-5 job. You're balancing farm work, which often continues from dawn to dusk, you know, with dementia caregiving, which is stressful on its own. So that leads to a lot of sort of mental health challenges. And then, you know, again, another difference is that agricultural dementia actually leads to some hard conversations that are not so often present in other situations. For example, discussions on succession planning or leadership, or phasing out one person who's employed on the farm because of dementia to get another person. And then lastly, stress does not just stay in the mind. There's a lot of work that has shown that caregivers were often, you know, ag workers themselves, you know, if they are distracted or not sleeping enough, their safety can be affected when they're doing their work itself. So it's actually, you know, a disease that affects the person who has it, whether they be a farm worker or someone who's living on the farmstead, their caregivers, their mental health, as well as their safety, as well as employers, you know, who might be having these caregivers employed, or, you know, person with dementia employed on their farm. So lots of issues here for lots of different people. And then here's another caregiver, you know, Arla, who talks about providing care to her mother and how that affected her.
So my brother and I have made some trade-offs by making mom's care a priority. Neither of us have taken a day to ourselves in years. So finding some personal time has been a huge challenge. And when we do find some time to ourselves, not worrying about my mom is another huge challenge. I wish I had a best practice for that, but I haven't found one yet. I'm glad to have this experience with my mom. So many of my friends haven't gotten to spend their parents' last days with them, so that's been a gift. But it is stressful and it can be very lonely at times. When I hear the saying, the person with dementia isn't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time, I want to scream because I'm having a hard time too. Keeping my mom's care organized, products and equipment stocked so caregiving is seamless, making sure there's healthy food, having quality time with my mom, my brother, my husband, my friends, all while having more than a full-time job is very difficult. I don't know that I've lost any opportunities in the ranching world because I'm a caregiver first, but I do think I could have done a better job ranching if I wasn't a caregiver. Not that these are necessarily profit-making changes, but I certainly would have felt like I gave my ranching career 100%. Not that these
Tried this before, but anyway, so talking to these caregivers, doing some of our own research, we applied for funding to come up with a program, educational series called Farm Families Coping with Dementia. We applied to the funding as the University of Iowa's Great Plains Center for Agricultural Health and applied for funding to NIOSH, which is the CDC agency for National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and received some money. And we worked with, you see this boardroom here, it's basically an advisory committee that we had, which included, people who were dementia experts like neuropsychologists, farm safety experts, extension, people from extension who actually ended up helping us much more than, just consulting on preparing this training. Family members who are dealing with or have dealt with, a person in the farming community with dementia, as well as sort of aging experts like me and Julie and some other people. So we came together, we took this money from NIOSH as a funding support, and we, came up with this educational series called Farm Families Coping with Dementia. So once we had this series, this is a lot of the content is based on what the experts told us and what we heard from caregivers before we applied for this funding. And once we came up with this program, we also piloted it recently and, made some tweaks based on that. So it's somewhat tested already. But what is this program? It's basically an interactive workshop to support individuals in the agricultural community who are providing care to persons living with dementia. And this workshop consists of 4 sessions. The sessions are dementia basics, farm safety and dementia, improving safety with dementia, and caregiving and communication. So these are weekly sessions. So there is 1 session a week. So it's a 4-week program. Each session is about 1 hour long, 60 minutes, and that includes questions, time for questions at the end. And we email sort of handouts to you after the session. The 3 key things to note about this is that these sessions are held online or over Zoom. So you don't have to go somewhere to attend these sessions or avail of them. They're held online, they're free. And one of the reasons why they're held online is because a lot of caregivers we talked to said that they can't leave the house because of the person with dementia, that they have to provide care for. And each of these sessions is delivered by extension. So, the Illinois State Extension, at least for this version of the program, is going to be delivering these sessions. They are trained on this content, which was part of the way we used our funding. And then they will be leading these sessions on these topics, and also sort of sharing their own experience living in the community and being rooted in the community for a long time. And then the last thing is that each of these sessions has some of these sort of input from caregivers, like audio that we just heard throughout all the sessions. So it's not just, a lecture-based session, but really interactive from the perspective of, listening to caregiver experiences, having quizzes, as well as having actually safety people, from Easter Seals or other places, actually show us some of the things that we can use. So just to give a little overview of each session. So in the first one, we really just talk about what dementia is, how it's different from normal aging or mild cognitive impairment, what are the different types and symptoms of dementia, what are like risk factors, things that can be changed, others that cannot be changed, What at the moment the most current way of diagnosing and treating dementia? What are those dementia, treating dementia with respect to both drugs as well as non-medication therapies. And then we talk about dementia prevalence and what happens in rural areas with regard to diagnosis rates and other things that are available or not available. And we end with dementia in ag workers, talk a little bit about that. And we also introduce in this session our caregivers, who talk about their personal experiences throughout these 4 sessions. In the next session, we take this forward and we talk about, how does dementia progress, over time, and how different types of dementias progress over time. What are the symptoms we can expect at each stage? How do these symptoms actually lead to a safety risk at the farm and, at home? So we actually have a lot of videos shot in farms where we show how typical, very normal things can become safety issues, in farm settings. The main point of this session is that many people think dementia is just a memory disease, but it's not. There are many other things that actually come before the memory problems start happening, which can lead to safety issues, including, how the brain perceives what the eyes see. That changes. And that can lead to a lot of falls or risk of falls, as well as other issues. And then also, of course, a problem with communication and so on. So really talking about that and how to look for that, is important. And that's what session 2 covers. The third one really talks about what are the different benefits of really improving safety. How can we evaluate or assess a person's safety risk who has dementia? And then, we introduced this method called the hierarchy of controls, which is basically a step-by-step method to help manage, common dangers like falls or injury related to equipment, livestock, wandering. So instead of making like ad hoc changes or really quick fixes, we're really systematically thinking about a person's safety, before things really get out of control. And then we also provide, sort of a basic considerations or general things to think about when creating a dementia-friendly space, whether it be your farm or your home. And then final session, since we heard so many of these mental health concerns, is focused on caregiving and communication. So it really talks about dementia caregiving in agriculture, why it's different, caregiver stress, how to recognize that, this is an elevated level of stress, how to manage it. How do we share a person's dementia diagnosis with others? When to share with family and friends, how to share with family and friends, how to talk to a person's physician or their team, what are the different questions to ask the physician, how do you communicate with the person living with dementia? Dementia not only changes a person's communication ability, but because they're from the ag community, it might actually have, it might be even more difficult because they may not be good communicators in some cases to start with. So we talk about different scenarios and how to sort of better communicate. And then finally, we provide helpful resources which are available for both caregivers and those living with dementia that they can sort of access and go forward with. So that's basically these 4 sessions. Each is, as I said, an hour long, offered by extension, provided online. Each one begins with a review. And at the very least, it's a way of getting together like-minded people who are going through the same problem and hear from each one how they are dealing with this situation. So to know if you're eligible for this project, if you are concerned about someone in a farming community who's showing signs of dementia or showing signs with problems with memory, or you feel like something may not be okay. So it's not necessary that they have a proper diagnosis of dementia, but if you think they might be having some problematic symptoms based on what you've been seeing and what you may be eligible for farm families coping with dementia. We've also enrolled individuals who know that, their spouse or their parent has had a long history in terms of their parents, having dementia. So, they might be concerned that this might be a real possibility. And if they want to join, they have also sort of joined. But you can be eligible for FFCD if you are someone. So this is for you as the caregiver, as the family member. If you have someone in your family who might be showing some signs. So It's as I said, there are 4 sessions. It's it's over 4 weeks. So the first session starts the week of July 21st. That's next week. There are 2 options to join. You can join either on Monday or Wednesday. Each session starts at 10 a.m. If you're interested, feel free to call at this number, 319-384-3817. And we'll just complete a brief eligibility survey and send you some consent forms and, a survey to start you off with the program. And you'll receive a Zoom link from us for the upcoming training starting the week of July 21st. There's also a QR code here, so you could just put your phone, open the camera on your phone and just take it, towards this square, and you'll see a link there to sign up electronically, and we'll be in touch. But we'll only be taking people, until Friday of this week, which I think is the 18th. So that way, since the training starts on on the Monday, on July 21st, we want to make sure that everybody is, screened and signed up and make sure all the forms are complete. So yeah, that's basically what I have today. So just a basic introduction of why this is important, what this project is about, what you will learn, and how to sign up. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I have some questions for you that might be ones that our members would have. So the first one being, so you have this first session in July. What are the other future sessions that would be available if they're thinking ahead?
Yeah, so I think we're just planning the dates with the extension, Illinois extension, and we are thinking it would be October, November. So this is July to August. Essentially, that would be October to November. So it will be most likely the 3rd week of October, all the way up to the week right before Thanksgiving. So that's basically the projected date, and we should have some new brochures with the final dates in a week or so, once we have the schedules figured out.
Okay, great. And in terms of eligibility, are there any limitations in terms of which states people are living in since you're working through the extension offices?
Not really, since this is a training that is offered online over Zoom, so if you live in any state, or even if you don't live in, the person with dementia is living on the farm, but you don't live on the farm, but you still want to help out someone who's living on a farm, you would be eligible. The only criteria is that you're a US resident, you're above 18, and you have someone in your family, or, even if you are a neighbor, someone you are concerned about who might be showing some signs of cognitive decline.
Okay. And if you yourself, your family has history with dementia, it's fine if you want to join to learn more about it as well, too, as somebody who's concerned about that in the future.
Yes, definitely so. So we've had some people join who are concerned about their spouses who they're not sure if they have dementia or not, but they do know that parents on both sides have had it. So, and their brother is showing signs. So, they feel very strongly that this is something they want to know more about. So if you yourself think that, you might be showing some signs, or if you live alone, and you want to figure out for yourself, you're also eligible.
Okay. And if somebody has questions about the program, the best step is to call that number to ask any questions they have.
Yes, call that number. I should have put my email on this slide as well, but maybe Jennifer, I can
include it in the follow-up.
Yeah. And so it's, if you can email me or call me. This is my number. So, either one is fine.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.